Joining me now is Dennis Dodd, the senior college football columnist for CBSSports.com. Dennis, thanks for joining me.
Randy, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is the perfect time of year for you. I mean, we go from media days to, it seems like this year at least, right after those ended, guys were going to camp. They were starting to practice, and right now we're looking at a countdown as to when things start. This year, for something unusual, there's not a week one per se. There's a week 0 before there's a week 1.
Yeah, we've got Rice and Stanford in Sydney, Australia, among others. I mean, Colorado State opens its new stadium, but it's the appetizer. It's the antipasta, I guess, before the main meal.
Yeah, that Colorado State game is against Oregon State. Aaron Taylor will be at that one, and then I've got the USF, Charlie Strong and company, going out to San Jose State. So it's just a weird deal. I keep seeing it on the schedule, and it's referred to as week 0, and I'm like, what the hell's a week 0? In the NFL, don't they call those preseason games? Yeah.
Which brings to mind the topic that could actually happen in college.
Oh, no, please don't say that.
Why not? Come on.
Fans have a chance to pay full price for games that don't count. Oh, boy. What fun.
Yeah, well, we need more football. We need more college football.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
What kind of a year, Dennis, do you think we're looking at in college football? Or is this, again, one of those years that we spend a lot of energy trying to create scenarios, but when it all comes down to it, it's the same 25, 30 teams that are going to be in the mix. And in those 25, 30, it's usually the same, 8 or 10.
Yeah, I'll go you one better. I think you can throw a blanket around the top 10, whatever yours may be, because it's probably the same as mine. And that's going to be your 4 playoff participants. It's really going to be chalk this year. Someone asked me to pick the biggest, playoff contender outside my top 10. My 11th team is Kansas State. I don't think Kansas State's going to be in the playoff. After that, it was Stanford. I don't think Stanford is. I think they're going to be really, really good, but I don't think they're going to be one of the top 4 teams in the country. I sort of settled on Wisconsin, which kind of wins the Big Ten West every year.
Right.
But can you envision them getting into the top 4? I don't know, maybe. But Alabama, Florida State, Oklahoma, the same schools we've been used to these first 3 years in the playoff, I think are going to be in some form and fashion in it this year.
Yeah, I was on Gio and Jones with Brian Jones yesterday on CBS Sports Radio, and I was sort of having a little laugh at his expense where he asked me what the top 5 was, my top 5. Yeah. And I said, well, outside of the top 4, what does it matter? Right. Why even give you a 5th team? Because, that's just the first team out.
Yeah. Alabama, Florida State. Who did I have? Oklahoma, maybe. Yeah. Not LSU. But
do you give Dabo? You give Dabo a chance?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. Okay. And that sounds like they're terrible. No, they're a top 10 team. Arguably a top 10 team. You don't lose Deshaun Watson and Mike Williams and Jordan Leggett and Gallman, the running back, and go 14-1 or 15-0. You just don't. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be favored in the ACC. They do get Florida State at home. So that's going to be a factor. But in what is now, in my humble opinion, the best college football conference in the country, I don't think it's reasonable to expect Clemson to repeat even getting back in the playoff, much less winning. I think they're really good, though. They've arrived. They're a national program.
Yeah, Dabo, my impression on Clemson is pretty simple. Dabo has, in a fairly short period of time, done a hell of a copy of that Alabama program. Yeah. From a talent stocking standpoint.
Yeah. Every great defensive lineman or every other great defensive lineman that doesn't go to Alabama seems to end up at Clemson. And if you're stocked with a front 7, you've got a chance. And that's what really led them last year. They had some great offensive weapons, but they were in a class where, even in a game, the championship game that featured 66 points.
Right.
that and the fact that Clemson was able to hold the ball and run 99 plays was the difference of the game. And a lot of that defensive line is back. And he talks about that. Dabo talks freely about that. He gets it. It's a line of scrimmage league in the SEC. And Clemson and Florida State, let's face it, to me are the 15th and 16th SEC teams. They run their programs exactly like an SEC school in terms of emphasis, funding, talent, recruiting, winning. That's what's happened. That's benefited the ACC to the point where I just mentioned. I think they're the best in ball right now.
How about out in the Pac-12? Obviously, that's kind of close to my heart. I played in the ancient, will not be named Pac-8. Just to fully qualify me in dinosaur status.
Right.
But USC is mentioned. They're on everybody's lips. Stanford is on most people's lips. Washington is, I see it as sort of begrudgingly being mentioned, though Chris Peterson, you discount him at your own peril. Outside of those teams, is there a chance a UCLA or a Washington State or somebody like that sort of rears their head this year?
Yeah, I would say no on the outset. I think, UCLA has, I think, like 15 starters back, a bunch of receivers, Josh Rosen. But it can be argued that, Jim Moore's window of opportunity is all but closed at UCLA in terms of vaulting itself past USC. He comes in 5 years ago, they're on probation. They don't have enough players on scholarship. I think he wins the first 2 or 3 meetings. And now USC is a top 5 team. So they're going to have to get past them in that division, which I don't think is going to happen. I think it is very interesting that you've probably got the best battle for LA in terms of quarterbacks between Rosen and Sam Darnold since Rodney Peete and Troy Aikman in the 80s. You've got maybe the 1-2 quarterbacks in the draft, or 2-3, or whoever. That's going to be fun to watch. But I don't think UCLA is that team. I don't think Washington State's that team. I think I love Mike Leach. I think he's maxed out there, winning 9 and 8 the last 2 years. And Washington has left the barn, and they've left everybody behind, in my opinion, in the North. Stanford's going to win 9 at least every year. But Washington, I think, from here on, is a perennial top 10 team in the country. And the best thing about the Pac-12 race this year is that USC and Washington don't meet. So that championship game, which looks like pencil it in, folks, USC-Washington, is going to be for a playoff spot. I think that's fascinating and really fun.
Yeah, it could be like a 4-6 or something like that by the time it happens. How about over in the Big Ten? The Big Ten spends a lot of time beating their chest and telling people that they're the best conference in the country. Is this as much of a, I guess, kind of a fair year for the Big Ten? And I only mean fair from the standpoint as, they do have some really good teams. And Penn State, you mentioned Washington kind of being back. Penn State's back.
Yeah, Penn State's in that conversation with USC in terms of being back. I think that Rose Bowl proved that when we saw all kinds of skill on that field, and maybe one of the best Rose Bowls ever. And I think what we really have to do now is reevaluate what we all think of James Franklin as a coach. He's taken Vanderbilt to back-to-back 9-win seasons, 2 9-win seasons. He's won the Big Ten. People almost forget that.
Yeah.
Ohio State got in the playoff, but Penn State won the league.
How much sense does that make?
Oh, they beat Ohio State.
I know.
Fair and square. And we talk about the rock star coaches in Meyer and Harbaugh. Franklin is now in there. And they're going to be really loaded on offense in, again, a division that is right there with the SEC West in terms of strength. I think the interesting, and you're right, the Big Ten is very good. There was a few years ago where we made fun of it. Hey, they can't get speed there. They can't recruit from the South. It's the Rust Belt. Well, that's all been disproven. Harbaugh and Meyer made everybody get better. To the point now where moribund Purdue hired Jeff Brom, who I think is a rising star as a head coach. I'm not saying they're going to be a factor this year. I think he's going to be really, really good, though.
They're going to be entertaining as hell. I know that with Jeff coaching.
They are. Michigan, I thought it played out before our eyes at the media days. Jim Harbaugh is now becoming a bit of a cartoon, a caricature of himself. He dressed in game day gear. They took the team photo of all the coaches. Yeah. He was the only one not in a suit. He wore the khakis, the Jumpman sweater, the hat, the Woody Hayes glasses. And that might have been fun the first time, but now it's starting to get towards, okay, when are you going to finish above third in the SEC East? And I think there's people in Michigan starting to ask that.
Yeah.
When are you going to beat Ohio State? He's 1-3 against Ohio State and Michigan State. Well, that's going to have to improve against the backdrop of a, this is going to be a fallback year for Michigan. They have the fewest starters back of any team in the country. 5. 1 on defense. And that doesn't include Rashawn Gary, who had the 5-star defensive lineman, who had a really good freshman season. So I think those are subplots. Ohio State should be favored and should win.
Now the Big 12, or what used to be the Big 2 and the little 10 and everything else, all the other fun jokes. Big 12 has got some good Oklahoma teams. Kansas State might be okay. Texas, I still got to think, in my way of thinking at least, is kind of an if and a maybe. Where is the Big 12 when you start measuring them against others?
They're pretty good. They don't do a very good job of controlling, put that message out there or controlling the message. They let the summer narrative from Paul Feinbaum be, well, the league's going to break up in 5 years. Well, not when when half the league is in the preseason top 25.
Right.
Not when Tom Herman is at Texas. And I'm not saying right now, but they're on solid footing now. Not when Texas is spending $220 million on facilities because of the promise of Tom Herman. And by the way, Oklahoma State might have the best offense in the country. And that might be enough to win that league. In fact, I have them in front of Oklahoma just because of the coach transition with Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley. Lurking in the background is Kansas State. I don't think you can pick them any lower than third. Bill Snyder and coming off throat cancer, I think they're a solid number 3 team. West Virginia won 10 last year and has a pretty good run-pass combination with Will Grier, the old Florida quarterback, and a bunch of receivers. That's a good place to start in the Big 12. So they're pretty good.
Yeah,
they're not a laughingstock. I think it's going. I really hope the Lincoln Riley, Tom Herman rivalry develops into that sort of like a 10-year war with Ohio State and Michigan, because for that league to be good long term, Texas and Oklahoma need to be good at the same time.
How much more would it have helped Lincoln Riley and that OU program if that change had happened after the bowl game? Something like, very, very quickly after the season.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. People questioned the timing, but and it came like June 7th, I think it was.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what's wrong with the timing? The hay's in the barn. You're into off-season conditioning. Recruiting is done. You're in that dead period before, the season starts, the preseason starts. I thought the timing was okay. And I take Bob Stoops at his word. I think he just thought it was time, and then this is, June 7th, it's not going to hurt the program. Lincoln Riley was being developed as the next coach anyway. The administration loved him. Bob Stoops loved him. The quarterbacks and the players liked him. They just, I think they all expected it to be in 5 years or so. That's the thing. Can he, as the youngest coach in ball at age 33, keep this thing going? We shall see.
The big picture in college football seems year in and year out, at least since we went to this 4-team playoff, isn't so much honing the 4-team playoff. It's always been, well, why aren't we doing 6? Why aren't we doing 8? Why aren't we doing more? Why isn't it more fair to everybody involved? Will there ever be a system I mean, you're never going to see a 64 team like the basketball side.
Yeah.
But will there ever be a point where people will look at it and go, you know what? We will really identify our best national champion with this system.
Yeah, I mean, down the line, I really think the CFP will go through its 12-year run. Mm-hmm. Whatever, I think it's 2025 at the last game, 2026 January.
Okay.
I think it'll go through there. I thought it was interesting that this week the CFP actually renewed its physical lease in Irving, Texas, in an office building until 2025, which is curiously when the contract ends. Mm. So they're all in. There's like a 6-year look in, not for the structure, but for the participating bowls themselves. So there will be some I guess movement there, at least maybe with the bowls, not with the structure. Everybody's making money. I had a TV executive tell me once that, look, there's no certainty if they go to 8, this thing gets better ratings. There's every chance that a Alabama Cincinnati game on campus in snow, is not well attended. And I'm using that as an example. And what would not do a great number is quarterfinals. I don't know if I agree with that, mm-hmm. But we've seen these TV and CFP executives mismanage New Year's Eve to the point that you saw 2 years ago the 36% ratings drop. So there are sensibilities here. I think it creates drama with one Power 5 at least being left out every year. We now know what a playoff looks like without a conference champion. It's reality that the top 4 go, and you're getting the best team. The best team is winning the championship. With 8, you get a more true tournament where if and you see it in baseball where the best team doesn't necessarily win. Boise State could win an 18 tournament due to attrition, and I'm using Boise State as an example. And I don't know if college football wants that as a whole. They don't take kindly to Cinderellas, but they do like their meat and potatoes, and so far that's what we've gotten.
Hey, college football will sort of officially start early. We talked about week 0 at the very beginning of this talk, but is there really a start point other than the Alabama-Florida State game for a lot of reasons? I mean, here locally in the Atlanta area, the new stadium's opening up. Just the base. Most polls have those two teams 1-2, 1-3, 2-3, whatever. Just your quick impressions before we go about that game.
I think that's the real kickoff to the season. If Florida State ends up being number 2 in the preseason AP poll that's released August 21st, that would be the first time that's ever happened in a kickoff game, 1 versus 2, and the earliest 1 versus 2 game ever. I think it's already in the conversation for best season openers ever, because of many storylines. Alabama's number 1, returning, won all these championships. Nick Saban facing a former assistant, a Nick Saban assistant, has never beaten him. Florida State's really good. And the fact that the loser, these two teams are so good, the loser could easily win the rest of its games, and you could have a rematch in the playoff. Yeah. So I think it's that good.
All right. Hey, Dennis, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. What you don't see here, we had a little glitches early, and you were very patient. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to do it, Randy. Thanks.
All right, Dennis. Thank you so much. Dennis Dodd, the senior college football columnist for CBSSports.com.